Hurricane force winds battering Réunion from Cyclone Belal. So the storm is passing extremely close to the coast of Réunion right now. A Category 2 still holding its intensity with winds estimated around 100 miles per hour or 160 kilometers per hour sustained. It is still moving southeasterly at around 11 kilometers per hour. It's got winds of 100 miles per hour as mentioned and a pressure estimate of 970 millibars. Recently a pressure recorded of 976 along the northern coast of Réunion. This is as of 11 AM Mauritius time this January 15th. As has probably been well publicised, violet warnings are in effect for La Réunion, which is the highest level that they have. It's got a fairly tight wind field though, only extending out 80 nautical miles, or actually statute miles there to the northwestern quadrant. It is just 20 kilometers from Saint Denis, 36 from St Paul, 79 from St Joseph, 226 from Port Louis on Mauritius, and 245 from Mahébourg. There are Class 1 warnings still in effect for Mauritius right now, and just a position update on the storm: 20.7 degrees south, 55.4 degrees east at this moment. So very close to land, the eye wall is gripping the coast, and indeed the eye is just offshore. Winds in excess of 100 miles per hour are likely already occurring on Réunion as it passes very close by. Mauritius could also still receive hurricane force winds on the south coast. Rainfall expected to reach 600 millimeters on Réunion and 100 millimeters on Mauritius. And as such, the primary hazard right now is the strong powerful winds. Here's the forecast then over the next few days, and interestingly the GFS model amongst others have trended downwards in its strength later on in the forecast period, and after watching the storm and struggling a little bit against wind shear in the last few couple of days, then that might be a more realistic scenario, that the storm is not going to be a super storm that goes round and round the islands for weeks on end, and hopefully it will die off quite quickly south of Rodrigues. So 100 miles per hour right now, JTWC slightly higher, 105, Météo France actually at 110 miles per hour, that's 175 kilometers per hour. So there's a little bit of a range there in forecasts. Now, to completely ignore the ADT satellite estimates, they aren't getting a center fix properly on the storm, and as such they're reading way too low. JTWC is still optimistic that it will retain hurricane equivalent status for the whole 5-day period. They're forecasting still for it to be a borderline Category 1 by the end of that period as it stalls close to Port Mathurin on Réunion. However, the GFS model has trended well away from that now, forecasting that the storm will be really struggling after passing through the islands and eventually dying off completely before we get to the end of the 7-day period. Of course, JTWC, to its credit, aren't forecasting any redevelopment afterwards, just a very slow weakening trend. So it's going to be, it's looking more likely now that it is going to weaken from here on in after it passes through the islands, and then eventually, well, GFS thinks it will die off completely now. Still a question mark over whether that actually happens. Here's the simulated reflectivity showing that the pretty much par for the course almost the entire life of this storm. The southern side is the most powerful and obviously the most apparent with regards to rainfall as well, and as such is quite a black and white contrast really between Réunion and Mauritius in terms of rainfall expectations. The northern side not getting quite as much rain, and the southern side really getting the worst and the most torrential parts with the elevated risk of flash flooding and landslides. Looking over the course of the next 7 days then, as we watch the rainfall generate on this chart here, you'll see that further rainfall estimates for Réunion may exceed 400 millimeters, particularly displaced to the southeastern side of the island. Indeed, some parts of the southwest may not get very much rain at all in comparison, maybe 100 to 200 millimeters. As for Mauritius, rainfall estimates going down again a little bit there. 50 to 100 millimeters is now what we're expecting, and on Rodrigues at the moment we're only expecting 1 inch, which is around 25 millimeters. So rainfall trending downwards slightly. Sea surface temperature still very warm around the storm right now, looking decent, getting up and above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 26-27 degrees Celsius, and a few spots getting to 28, maybe even 29 in 1 or 2 little areas northwest of the storm. Of course, it isn't going that way now, but for maybe a future storm, those temperatures are very much there right now. So let's take a look at the satellite imagery then, as we were looking at them on the images on the early part of the on the opener, and you can see on the visible imagery you can just about make out where the center of that storm is, although it has been a little bit elusive at times. But that movement is still clearly east-southeastwards. No guarantee that it will make landfall, but it still could just do a little slight jog southwards and actually reach land. Here are the latest radar frames as of the time of broadcast on Météo France, and you can't actually see the island underneath all of that radar, but clearly that eye is very visible. And this is some imagery from the Force 13 website, force13.com/satellite. That's something that you can take a look at live, and you can also look at our automated stream, which is running 24/7 during the life of this storm as it continues southeastwards. So once again, you can see little bits of that eye on the visible, but on infrared, a little bit clearer there as well, with cloud tops obviously much higher on the southern side, really looking quite weak actually, the storm on the north side, and possibly an open eye there, although radar may disagree. We'll check that out again in a moment. These air infrared looking decent, some good cloud tops there, and this is some more radar imagery. Northern side is closed by the looks of things, but much weaker I would say, but maybe it's not, we can't be too sure, we can't check out that radar properly. But this storm is obviously barraging the islands right now and is on its way through.